She didn't meet the physical attributes of what I was looking for in a wife, but I felt like, hey, this must be the woman that God wanted me to marry. Jesus' voice talking to me about contacting the Mormon church, and he gave me information about them. I followed the instructions of the dream. I contacted the Mormon church. They sent me their Book of Mormon, and everything that I read matched the information that was given to me in the dream. Having been in the emergency field, firefighting and police, you learn to control your emotions and not let emergency situations get you startled. So yeah, I learned that. But as far as not being afraid to die, I think that's more of my relationship with God. I'm ready. Yeah, I don't mind dying at all.
This is Robert Fratta. He has been sentenced to death for a horrific crime. But to understand his crimes, we have to go back to November 9th, 1994.
Allen County, what is your emergency?
Yes, I just saw a shooting, please.
Okay, do you know if anybody's been shot?
Yes, I see the lady. I see her in her garage right now.
Is somebody shot?
Yes.
Stay on the line. Let me connect you with the ambulance service. Hold on. Allen County, go
Yes,
ahead.
I just saw a shooting.
You just saw a shooting?
Yes.
And what is your location?
I'm at Timbers Trail in Atascocita.
Timbers Trail?
Yes. In Atascocita. You need to send an ambulance. She's down.
Alright, I just need to find out where we're going now.
There's a black man. Is he black? I don't want to say he's black.
Sir, have you done
He's
the call?
dressed in black. There's a man at her house though, and my lights are on, and I know.
Okay, have you called the sheriff's department?
No, I just don't.
This is 911. I'm waiting to transfer if you're done with it, because we need to get out there. Very good, then. I'll have to get out there. Dispatch of it.
Okay, there's someone still over there.
Laura, stay on the line.
I'm still here. I'm still
Hold
here.
on.
County Sheriff's
I want to
Department.
have a shooting. Atascocita, I'm messing around. Go ahead, ma'am. Suspect still there.
Okay, so there's still a person out there. There's a black gentleman. He's got a black shirt and a black pants. The lady is down in her garage. She's been shot 2 times. There were 2 shots.
Oh dear, okay. All right, and what EMS is en route to Atascocita?
Yes. Oh my God.
Okay. And the suspect is still there. Where is the guy?
She is in her garage.
The suspect?
No, the suspect is, there's a car that just pulled up. The suspect is behind a tree, and he can't see me. I have my lights up, but there's a car that just pulled up, and I can't tell what color.
Okay, ma'am.
Oh God, my husband's not like get in here. I think Darren went to see the license plate, but he can't get the license plates of the car.
Okay. All right, so if you can, will you call us back, okay?
Okay.
If the guy gets in the car with us.
License plate, babe? Can I get back in the house? Shut the door, please. Did the man get in the car?
Ma'am,
The black
this is the
man.
house, right?
Yes, the black man just got in the car there, but it was a silver car, I believe.
Uh-huh.
Darren, do you know what kind of car it is?
Ma'am, did you say this is Timber Trail Drive?
Timbers Trail Drive, yes.
It has an S on it?
Let me tell you something about the car real quick. It was a silver car with 1 burnt out headlight.
Okay.
Hatchback.
Real
small Toyota.
About 6 years old.
About 6 years old.
It could be a Honda.
It could be a Honda. The lady is still in her garage. And they turned the lights out in the garage.
Does the car look like it's waiting for suspect?
Yeah, and it already drove off.
Oh, with them in there?
Yes. The suspect just took off.
Did you get that? Okay.
No, my husband went up to look, but then I just gave you the description of
Okay, well, does Timbers have an S on it?
Timbers, yes, it does.
Okay, that's why it's not coming up in the computer. Okay, let me try this.
I'm just very scared because I know these people just run like around. Do you think they saw my house?
Okay. Hold on just a moment.
Oh, God. Should we go over there and see her? Darren, please don't go over there. Okay.
Okay, ma'am.
Yes?
I'm going to transfer you to Constable Precinct 4 so they can talk to you, okay?
Okay.
Since this is in progress, you might have some information that they need.
Thank you. Don't go over there, sweetie.
Hold on, ma'am.
Okay. God. Darren, my roommates are going to go over there to see her.
Ma'am, I have Precinct 4 on the line. Constable
Okay.
Precinct 4. Go ahead, sir.
Okay.
Can you tell me what's going on?
Yeah, I just saw a shooting. I was in my living room nursing my baby, and I looked out my window, and our neighbor was outside her garage, and she was shot 2 times.
By a passing motorist?
No, the guy, it looked like he was either in her garage waiting for her, or I just saw his pants, and then I saw a black man, and he was dressed in black, and he was waiting, and he jumped into a car.
What kind of a car?
It was a silver car. My husband gave the 911 description, but my husband just pulled up into her driveway. He can see her, and she's down. My husband's going right now to see if he can help her.
Okay, your husband is not armed or anything?
No. The only thing he has is mace.
Okay, did y'all see who did it?
No, all I saw was the pants, and then I saw the gentleman, but I can't give a description of the guy.
Okay, but he was in a silver Toyota?
Yes, and a hatchback there, so it had one headlight out, or one something out. My husband knows. He's over there with her right now.
Okay, and he shot her twice?
Yes, I heard 2 shots. I heard her scream, and I looked out my window. And my lights are all over. These people saw inside my house.
Okay,
My husband's running.
Gamble, right?
She shot in the head, my husband said. She shot in her head.
Yeah, that woman that's been shot in the head, she's still alive.
And she does have 3 children. I do not know if the children are home.
Huh?
Okay, there's a police officer coming. I see someone coming.
Yeah,
Oh, dear Jesus, help this woman.
Okay, we got a unit over there.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and you need to advise them what y'all did see, okay?
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Before we begin, we would like to send our sincere condolences to the loved ones of Farah Frauta, who fell victim to the abominable acts described in this case. It was a quiet Wednesday evening in a suburban area of Humble, Texas on November 9th, 1994. 33-year-old Farah Frauta had just returned home from visiting the hair salon, an errand she scheduled while her 3 children were at their usual Wednesday evening with their father, Robert Frauta. After opening the garage door, Farah was taken by surprise when a man walked through the door and shot her in the head. She screamed and fell to the cement floor. Before leaving, the intruder shot her in the head one more time and then stood behind a tree in the yard to wait for his ride, who appeared less than a minute later. Farah was left lying in a pool of blood. What the intruder didn't realize was that he had been spotted by neighbors from across the street, Laura and Darren Holscher, who saw the whole thing and called 911. By the time police and paramedics arrived at the scene, Farah had already lost a significant amount of blood. Police spoke with the Holschers, who provided them with a description of the shooter and the getaway car. Not long after police and paramedics arrived at the scene, Robert came driving up with the children. Detectives at the scene asked Robert to come to the police station to make a statement, which he agreed and was interviewed by police that same night. While the police investigated the scene and interviewed the witnesses, paramedics focused on getting Farah into a chopper to get her to the hospital quickly, but it was too late. She died before she even reached the hospital. Farah had been living alone with her 3 children after she had filed for divorce from Robert in March of 1992, something Robert was not happy about. The divorce turned ugly very fast because Farah exposed Robert's sexual fetishes and was fighting for custody of their children. Robert was also fighting for custody. Farah's murder occurred 3 weeks before the divorce trial. At the police station, Detective Larry Davis conducted the interrogation with Robert. Davis asked Robert where he had been during the time of Farah's murder. Robert said that he took the children to church that evening.
But police say Frauta didn't seem surprised.
His demeanor was not what you would expect from the husband of deceased, although they were going through a very bitter divorce.
During the interrogation, Davis noticed that Robert appeared smug and showed signs of deception throughout the whole process.
His demeanor was such during the interview that he was not what we would call freely forthcoming with all his information.
What Robert never showed was emotion toward his wife's tragic death.
He showed no remorse. He showed only the fact that he was full of himself, that he was cocky, that he could beat this. That's the impression you got of Bob Frauta that day. The prosecutors wanted the last thing the jury to see was Bob Frauta winking at the camera.
find what?
I didn't. That's where all the everything was roped off and taped off. And when I walked over, like I said, my initial reaction when I could nobody really look frantic or anything like that. I mean, I guess it all had already occurred and life had already taken off, whatever. And I honestly thought there was a drug raid or something. So that's why I walked over and didn't think too much of it. And when the constables told me.
You still feeling sure?
It's starting to hit me now. I mean, I loved her. I mean, I wanted to spend the rest of my life with her. I never wanted a divorce. I didn't do anything to warrant a divorce. Yeah, I mean, I still care about her.
Have you ever hit your wife?
I'm sorry?
Have you ever hit your wife?
Never hit her. It's very hard to raise my voice, so I can pretty much say I never did raise my voice to her.
Why did she want a divorce?
I guess to sum it up, basically, there was no romance and affection in our marriage. It was more like, I loved her, I provided for her, and took care of her and everything, but I guess we just weren't in love with each other, you know?
Davis then asked what should happen to someone that had their wife killed. Robert said it depended on the circumstances. At that moment, Davis believed without a doubt that Robert was involved in Farah's murder. However, without solid evidence to convict him, they had to let Robert go. After detectives received Robert's permission to search his vehicle, they found an address book and an envelope containing $1,000. Robert explained that the money was to pay for new carpeting. Detectives believed that the money in Robert's car was a clue and considered the idea that Robert may have paid someone to kill his wife.
The money was an important issue with us, and where you'd think, well, who's going to do this for $1,000? But at the same time, it could easily be upfront money to do something with a payment coming later. It could be money left over from the payment.
The detectives contacted multiple people they found in Robert's address book. Most were friends. All of these men told investigators that Robert was going around asking if there was anyone willing to kill his wife. Robert's church alibi was also investigated. Detectives found out that Robert spent the majority of that night on the phone.
Fratta had his children with him so he would have an alibi, and while he was out with his children, he knew that this was occurring. He was at church, he was visible. One thing he didn't count on, though, is that there were phone records that showed that there were phone calls made all night long between his pager, between a pager that was leased by Price Dash's girlfriend at the church, and so they were communicating with each other all night while this offense was occurring.
After obtaining phone records from the church, detectives discovered that he made multiple calls to a phone and a pager owned by Mary Gipp. One call to Farah's house and multiple calls to a payphone outside of a grocery store located close to Farah's home. Detectives spoke to Gipp, who said that she was at home with her boyfriend, Joseph Pricedash, the night that Farah was murdered, and said that she didn't recall using either her phone or her pager that night. On March the 1st, 1995, Gipp was subpoenaed to testify in front of a grand jury. It was at this point that she agreed to tell all, as long as she was provided immunity from prosecution. Gipp explained that her boyfriend, Pricedash, knew Robert from the gym. She said Robert first hired Pricedash 6 months before Farah's death to break into her home and attack her, which he did using a taser gun, an incident that Farah reported to police and suspected that Robert was behind. However, at that time, there was no evidence to prove who had done it or why, so the police could do nothing. Later, Pricedash found someone willing to kill Farah for money. Gipp's 18-year-old neighbor, Howard Guidry. Gipp also supplied detectives with the serial number of the gun that was used to kill Farah, and it matched a gun found on Guidry when he was arrested for bank robbery on March 1st of 1995. It also matched the bullets found at the shooting. Detectives discovered that Robert had purchased the gun. Guidry not only admitted to police that Price Stash hired him to kill Robert's wife for $1,000, he also gave a full demonstration of the event.
Whenever I killed the girl, I was at church with children.
Where'd you get the pistol from?
Joe. I got the pistol from Joe. Maybe 30 minutes before we got here. Back at the apartment. Joe gave me the gun.
Why don't you, in your own words, Howard, why don't you tell us what happened here?
I was dropped here, from here, we went across.
Sure, let's walk.
We're entering the rear yard of the Prada residence. I ran into the house. I sat out for approximately maybe 20 minutes. And I gave him a call from the same phone, payphone. I told him that she hadn't made it back yet. I told him just to wait it out. And I hung up the phone with him. Maybe 2 minutes after that, the car pulled in to the garage. When the car pulled in, I came out of the little house. And I walked up to right here. I stood right here, 38 in my hand. And I waved this flag in front of the door, but nobody came, but I heard noise. So I turned around like this. I take the door, but it was locked from the outside. So I just waited. And then when the door finally opened, I walked in. When I walked in, I faced the woman. We was face to face. And I turned to the side like this. And we was face to face like this. And I had the gun in my hand. I pulled the gun up and I shot her once in the head. And she like fell to the side, or slumped to the side. And I started to run out. And as I started to run out, she wasn't really dead. So I turned around, I closed my eyes and I shot her one more time in the head. And I exited this door right here. And I turned to look around to see if anybody was looking. Nobody was looking. So I turned and I ran.
Howard, if you would turn and look face down.
I made the phone call to Joe to let him know that I was ready to go and it was over. And he came in 30 seconds to maybe 30 seconds, 45 seconds at the most.
After talking to Guidry, detectives picked up Price Stash, who said he knew nothing, but when Lieutenant Billingsley drove Price Stash back to the parking lot where they had picked him up, Billingsley said Price Stash told him everything, including how Robert promised to give him a Jeep in exchange for his services. Police arrested Price Stash on March 13, 1995 for his involvement in Farah's murder. After gathering all the evidence against him, police were finally able to arrest Robert on charges of solicitation of murder on April 21, 1995. Robert's first trial was held in April of 1996, and a jury found him guilty of the capital murder of Farah, and he was sentenced to death by lethal injection.
I'm glad justice has prevailed, freedom has prevailed.
Victim's family wept when the verdict was read. So did Frada's family. The defendant only stared at the table in front of him. After a long investigation, Frada was charged with hiring a hitman to shoot his wife. The gunman's confession was read in court, which Frada's attorneys objected to.
Are you saying this is an unfair verdict? Absolutely. No question about it.
Frada's family declined comment, but the victim's parents, who are in custody of their grandchildren, said plenty.
The young girl, she still asks for her mother. Mommy, I love you, Mommy. I miss you, Mommy. I know you're in heaven. And someday when I die, I'm going to meet you in heaven. Now that's a lot of torture. That's a hell of a lot of torture.
In closing arguments, Frada was portrayed as a sexual deviant. Lex Backer also called him a menace to women. Betty Backer said she wants Frada executed.
Wait for the day when I see him laying on that table, waiting to get the injection. That will be justice for me. I know for myself he's gone.
13 years later, Robert's case was overturned due to inadmissible evidence provided during the first trial. In 2009, Robert had a retrial and was again found guilty and sentenced to death. His sentence was carried out on January 10th of 2023.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Robin Allen Fratta, guilty of capital murder as charged in the indictment, signed by the foreman.
How could a person be capable of orchestrating a murder like this? And how could that person be so brazen as to ask if someone would be willing to help carry out the crime, then, after the murder was committed, go around smiling and winking at the camera just like nothing happened? Simply put, Robert Fratta was a narcissist.
He definitely thought he was pretty much the center of the universe, and that he could not stand the idea of a woman walking out on him. I think Bob thought he knew enough about police work, law enforcement investigations, that he didn't even worry about it.
Bob was very serious about working out in the gym. He was always looking in the mirror. He couldn't go past a mirror without looking into it.
Walked into the courtroom, and he came out in his suit and all that, still looking very groomed and very sure of himself.
What that test really said about Bob Fratta was nothing good. And it called him sociopathic, narcissistic.
Fratta was diagnosed as narcissistic and also having an antisocial personality disorder.
A forensic psychologist with over 20 years of experience, Dr. Jeff Kolochevsky, offers an in-depth look at the mind of a narcissist.
A narcissistic personality disorder is characterized by a lifelong pattern of exaggerated feelings of self-importance, an excessive need for admiration, severe self-centeredness, a diminished ability to empathize with others' feelings, and tendencies towards interpersonal exploitive behavior. In some of the earlier writings about narcissistic personality disorder, psychologists talked about this as a condition of psychosis, with the individual's belief about situations not always based in the reality or the facts of the situation. They often operate with a distorted reality. Their perceptions of their situations are often bent towards their own self-aggrandizement or self-centeredness.
For Robert's 2009 retrial, Dr. Ron Bailey, a board-certified forensic psychiatrist, studied Robert's medical records going back 25 years. From his study, Dr. Bailey concluded that Robert suffered from paranoia, delusional thoughts, and a mild brain impairment. He also described Robert as narcissistic. A 2018 interview with film director Werner Herzog provided more insight into the delusional mind of Robert Fratta.
Fratta loses himself in dreams and religious revelations, as if a finger of God had pointed at him.
It was Jesus' voice talking to me about contacting the Mormon Church, and he gave me information about them, and it coincided with previous, what I firmly believe are revelations of God for me to write about a new government system and forming a new country. And once I followed the instructions of the dream. I contacted the Mormon Church. They sent me their Book of Mormon, and everything that I read matched the information that was given to me in the dream. And that's not something that's going to happen, especially when you have no knowledge of this at all. So in my dreams, just a part of the United States that we would, like the Christians would go ahead and just be given our own land within the United States to form our own nation called the Kingdom of Zion. And it's where we vote for a king, and the king would be a Christian king, and things would be done in alignment with the Bible. It would be a Christian nation, and we don't have that now. This country has turned us back on God.
There's a lot of evidence to indicate that Fratta had very strong narcissistic personality features, if not a narcissistic personality disorder. He was often superficial, glib. He often performed for the camera and talked about himself with a perceived self-importance. Also, he appeared to lack empathy towards his estranged wife, or how this situation would likely affect his children.
Police were quick to notice Robert's smug demeanor in 1994, according to Lieutenant Billingsley.
Bob thought he was smarter than everybody else. He thought he was smarter than we were.
During Robert's interrogation, which occurred only hours after Farah's death, he attempted to joke with the detective.
Ever been arrested either in New York or here? I'm sorry?
Sadly, Detective Davis, who handled the interrogation, made no effort to use this information to his advantage.
The police interrogation was completely botched. The detective did not use typical forensic interviewing techniques or strategies. The interviewer did not seem motivated to cultivate information from the suspect. And with Frada's demonstrated narcissism, it would have been easy to get him to talk. And the more he talks, the more likely information can slip out that he would have intended to keep to himself.
As a narcissist with delusional thoughts, Robert somehow convinced himself that he had every right to rid himself of Farah, who was divorcing him and going for custody of their children, as well as for exposing his secret sexual fetishes. Even if a person is narcissistic and delusional, how can they believe that they have the right to take someone's life and believe they're not responsible for that person's death?
How could someone with severe narcissism murder someone else or arrange for someone to be murdered? Well, if their drive to meet their own desires is so intense, they can distort in their minds the facts of the situation and justify that a person needs to not exist so that their desires or wants are met. It makes sense that a severe narcissist would hire someone to murder rather than do it himself. If he has any compunction towards guilt for killing someone, then they can exonerate themselves by having someone else do the killing. Then in their own distorted mind or view, they shouldn't feel guilty. They actually did not murder the person.
God forgive me, I love my wife so much. She's everything to me. All I did was try to protect her.
This is 20-year-old Skylar Nemitz, an infantry soldier stationed at Fort Lewis, Washington. Skylar had just returned home from a 3-week training operation. But just hours after being reunited with his 19-year-old wife, Danielle, her deceased body was discovered by police in the couple's Lakewood apartment. Skylar would claim that Danielle had lost her life to what amounted to a tragic accident. But had it really been an accident? Or had something much more sinister occurred? Before we start, we would like to send our condolences to the friends and loved ones of Danielle Nemitz, who fell victim to the harrowing events described in this case. Born 7 weeks early on January 11, 1995, Tara Danielle Rippian was described as a miracle baby. Tara, who later went by her middle name Danielle, had been born weighing just 3 pounds and was not predicted to survive the night. But Danielle had defeated those odds, and it was this inner drive and love of life that later would be remembered most by those who knew her. A flyer on the cheerleading squad, her teammates described her as a small stick of dynamite, owing to her petite frame and charismatic personality. But deep down, Danielle craved a sense of belonging. At just 2 years old, Danielle had lost her mother to cancer. She had been raised by her grandmother until the age of 14, when her grandmother also passed away. Danielle had moved in with her stepfather, Michael Bolton, but he had his own share of troubles to deal with. Her coach remembers Danielle seeking stability in the boys that she dated and their families. She'd later say she always got very close with the families of the boyfriends she had because they were the most stable part of her life. But it was just that need to be loved. During her final year of high school, Danielle met 20-year-old Skylar Nemitz on Facebook. Skylar had recently enlisted in the Army and was due to begin basic training in Georgia. But the pair soon embarked on a whirlwind relationship. Skylar later described it as a case of love at first sight. As for Danielle, within weeks, she was telling her friends that Skylar was the guy she was going to marry. None of this surprised those who knew her, but even by Danielle's standards, their relationship was moving fast. Skylar's mother, Danette Heller, remembers being taken aback when, just a month after the pair began dating, Skylar asked if Danielle could move in with them. Danette had some reservations, but eventually agreed. When Skylar returned from boot camp at their first Christmas, he took Danielle to the top of Kneeland Mountain and proposed to her. She accepted. And just 3 months later, on March 7th, 2012, the same day as Skylar's graduation from basic training, the couple married at the local courthouse. Within weeks, Danielle had left school and they had relocated to Lakewood, Washington, where Skylar had been assigned his first stationing at Fort Lewis. The couple seemed to have the kind of love that most people dream of. With Skylar's encouragement, Danielle completed her final year of education at a local high school before taking a job at a granite counter company. She aspired one day to open a nail salon and began posting makeup tutorials on YouTube. The couple adopted 2 dogs and made plans to travel the world together before starting a family of their own. And they shared another passion: firearms. A favorite date night activity for the couple was an evening at a local shooting range. Skylar had grown up around guns and had fired his first rifle when he was still a kid. He handled weapons every day as part of his job. By 2014, he had 15 different customized weapons in their apartment. When Danielle turned 19, Skylar presented her with a blue AR-15 that he had customized himself. But while things may have looked perfect from the outside, those closest to the couple knew differently. Michaela Yingling had been Danielle's best friend for years, initially bonding with her over their shared experience of losing their mothers at a young age. Michaela understood more than anyone Danielle's desire to belong, but she had had her reservations about Skylar from the start. He had taken Danielle away so quickly she never had a chance to get to know him, and he seemed to have no desire to involve her in their lives. When Michaela had been expecting her first baby, he had refused to let Danielle go home for the baby shower. During her regular FaceTime calls with Danielle, she noticed that her friend was often stressed about getting the house in order for him, right down to shampooing the carpets. Another lifelong friend of Danielle's, Samantha Minton, noticed Skylar's odd behavior. When the couple came home to visit, Skylar would leave Danielle at his parents' house while he went to see his friends alone. James Peltier, who had been a father figure to Danielle growing up, said, "I met him on 3 occasions. I think I shook his hand, and then he just went back to the car and left." According to James, Skylar made no effort to form any connection with the people closest to Danielle. When she confided in him that Skylar had smashed her phone during an argument, he asked Danielle if she was afraid of Skylar. Her reply had deeply concerned him. She said, "Only when he's been drinking." And that was just what her friends had seen as well. Neighbors would later say they heard the couple arguing on a nearly daily basis. Skylar, it seemed, was convinced that Danielle was being unfaithful to him. In one text, he had openly accused her of cheating with a childhood friend. Danielle wrote back, "You have either insecurities you need to work on, or you don't trust me when it comes to hanging out with Jeremy." And Skylar's issues extended beyond the remit of jealousy. He was infuriated if she spent any money without his permission and took to tracking her spending. On September 27, 2014, Skylar had left for a 3-week-long field training operation in Yakima, Washington. Danielle stayed home with the couple's 2-bedroom apartment and their dogs. No drinking was permitted during their training. Skylar had asked Danielle to have something ready for him when he returned and made a specific request: a bottle of Sailor Jerry rum and a bottle of Fireball whiskey. It was a seemingly innocuous request, but one that would become a major player in the events that would follow. On the morning of October 16th, Danielle FaceTimed with her best friend Michaela. She was leaving shortly to pick Skylar up from the Army base, and she told her friend that she was excited to be reunited with her husband. She had already bathed the dogs and decorated the house with candles. At 4 p.m., she FaceTimed Michaela again. Michaela remembers Danielle sitting at her computer in their spare bedroom and seeing Skylar laying on the bed behind her. He smiled and waved hello. Just 12 minutes later, the following 911 call would be made by neighbors.
911, what are you reporting?
Hi, I think somebody was shot our neighbors. We heard a lot of banging and our neighbors were making a lot of noise. I didn't want to check. He said his rifle was out and there was an accident. He said her name is Danielle.
Think Danielle was the one that shot and he accidentally shot her?
I don't know that part. We just heard the gun go off and she said there was an accident.
Okay, is she breathing at all?
Is she breathing? Is she breathing? No.
And you said you don't know his name?
No, I don't.
Can you ask him his name?
What's your name? Skylar.
Here's someone screaming.
I'm their neighbor, and I heard a shot go off, and I wasn't sure if it was a shot or anything else. The husband said that she's dead. He doesn't want me going in to see her. It was a accidental discharge because the round was in a rifle.
So the male told you that his wife is dead?
Yes.
Okay, so she accidentally shot herself, is that correct? Or what you've been told?
She accidentally shot herself.
The husband did not want to talk about it. So we just need some security.
Yeah, we have been notified at some place from somebody else. Do you guys know where that rifle is?
I didn't ask.
Skylar told his neighbors that Danielle had accidentally shot herself while cleaning her rifle. He would not let anyone see her and refused to talk to the 911 operator. Thomas Rodriguez, the chief of police for the town of Stellicum, along with 2 other officers, were the first to arrive on the scene. In the spare room of the couple's apartment, he found Danielle sitting at her computer with her head slumped on one shoulder, a large pool of blood beneath her chair. She had been shot at close range in the back of the head and was pronounced dead at the scene. Outside, he found Skylar slumped on the bumper of his car. According to Rodriguez, Skylar's face was contorted and he was making sobbing sounds. But when he looked up at Rodriguez, his eyes were dry and he said, "I don't know why I can't cry." Skylar had already explained to Officer Daryl Moore that he had been taking the magazine out of his rifle when it had gone off against his leg, striking Danielle as she sat at her desk. He insisted that he had not seen the single bullet that was in the chamber of the rifle. This, however, was different from the account he had given to his neighbors, but it would just be the second account of many. Skylar repeated the story to Rodriguez. He said he had only shaken the rifle. I just shook it and it shot her. At 6:07 p.m., Skylar was arrested and placed in the back of a patrol car, where he was informed that he was being recorded on camera, both audio and visual. A morose and silent Skylar would then launch into a bizarre monologue that would last the entire journey to the police precinct, a full 35 minutes. Later, people would comment that Skylar's antics, at times he was sobbing, at other times shouting, seemed more like a performance than a genuine expression of grief. He also seemed to be able to snap out of his grief anytime an officer addressed him.
You call and come forward, just please be as patient as you can. So, okay? Awesome, thank you, I appreciate it. Hey sir, were you notified you're being audio and visually recorded?
That's fine, I'm not gonna do anything.
Okay, just so you know you're on camera, okay? Have you been advised of your Miranda rights? Okay, just hang tight, okay?
Once at the station, detectives would interview Skylar for nearly 5 hours.
So I took the rifle, I took the magazine out. And I don't know what the fuck happened. Like, I didn't charge it, I didn't pull the trigger or anything. I hit the safety. I turned the safety from safe to semi because I was about to charge it to make sure it was clear. Even though when I gave it to her, I knew it wasn't around. So I think that when I was gone, she might have put a round in the chamber, maybe, not knowing what she was doing. And so I don't know what the fuck. I did not pull the trigger, and the magazine was not on the weapon. I put the weapon on fire. It was on fire, so it had the probability of firing the weapon. And I don't know how the fuck it went off, but it went off.
Inconsistencies in his account began to appear immediately. Skylar first tells detectives that he left Danielle's rifle in the closet with the magazine far away from the rifle. Then he states that when he had decided to put the rifle back in the safe, he had begun by removing the magazine. The same magazine he had just said was kept far away from the weapon. Skylar is made to repeat his version of the events. With each reiteration, he loses a few details and introduces others. Now, it was Danielle who had asked him to put the rifle away.
30 minutes before this all happened, she took it from the closet into the office.
Okay.
And she said, I don't need this anymore, just put it away.
About one aspect, though, Skylar seemed certain: the moment the gun discharged. He demonstrates to detectives how he was moving the rifle when it went off. Detectives asked if they were going to find any digital forensic evidence that Skylar and Danielle were having marital problems. With Skylar's clothes taken away for forensic testing, detectives now confront him with the news that the trajectory of the bullet does not match his account of the events.
I really have no problem
Because
with
your
that.
story doesn't make sense. There's a huge fucking gap in your story. You're detailed all the way through up to the point where we had to talk to you for 2.5 hours to get you to realize that we're smarter than you think, and you shouldered the weapon because the fucking trajectory of that fucking round didn't match up. So immediately you changed the fucking story. That's about the 8th time you've done that. When your story, about 8 times, when your story doesn't make sense and you hear it for the 2nd time and we bring something up, you change the story. I'm trying to figure out why you put a gun in the back of your wife's head and pulled the trigger.
Skylar offers a revised version to the detectives, this time admitting that he not only pulled the trigger, but that it was no accident. He just didn't know the gun was loaded.
Me firing the weapon, or me pulling the trigger was not an accident. Okay? I did not know there was a weapon. Her getting hit with that round, it was an accident, and I was not mad, I was not angry.
Okay, so tell me what happened.
I was holding the weapon, I took the magazine out, okay? I took the fucking magazine out, I put the weapon on fire, and I pulled the trigger.
Seeking a motive, detectives now asked Skylar about a receipt found in the apartment for a dozen roses. Skylar sticks to his story that he pulled the trigger without intending to kill Danielle. But other witnesses were soon to come out of the woodwork. The day after Danielle's death, a woman named Carrie Foss turned up at the police station claiming to have information about the incident. Carrie was the wife of Anthony Foss, a friend and colleague of Skylar's. Carrie told police that throughout the time she had known the couple, Skylar had subjected Danielle to continual domestic abuse. Danielle had taken to wearing long sleeves to cover up the bruises up and down her arms. Carrie described Skylar as so controlling that at certain points, he had banned Danielle from even leaving their apartment. As for the co-worker whose wife had been the recipient of the roses, that had been Danielle's boss, Michael Newton. Carrie recalled Danielle telling her about Michael the first time that she had met him. Danielle confessed that she found him attractive, but that, as far as Carrie knew, had been the end of it. Not for Skylar, though. Skylar had been convinced that Danielle was having an affair with Michael. When Schuyler had returned from training, he thanked Anthony for buying the alcohol, only to discover that it was Michael Newton who had bought it instead. Carrie described seeing Schuyler visibly shaking with rage. Carrie had also told police that during the 3 weeks that Schuyler had been away, Danielle had met up with an old school friend by the name of Jeremy Henry. She told Carrie about the meeting over text, and Carrie believed that her husband Anthony had seen the messages and told Schuyler. Detectives now spoke with Anthony Foss. Anthony admitted that he had been aware that Schuyler had been violent with Danielle and that he and a former squad leader, Sam Phillips, had warned him that if it didn't stop, they would take action. Police then spoke to Danielle's boss, Michael Newton, as well as her old friend, Jeremy Henry. Michael explained that since Danielle was the company's first hire and he was the manager, he had been in frequent contact with her, but their relationship had never been anything more than strictly professional.
So did the relationship become more than just a working relationship?
No, not at all.
Okay.
We never did anything together whatsoever.
In his interview with police, Jeremy Henry admitted the last time he'd seen Danielle was the previous Wednesday night.
So you said 2 times you spent the night in the last 3 weeks over there?
Yes, sir.
And you were over there Wednesday night prior, but you didn't spend the night? Yes, okay. Were you over there any other nights other than the 2 that you spent in the 3 weeks?
I went to the mall with her one time.
Pierce County prosecutors now felt they had enough evidence to charge Schuyler. Schuyler had admitted to picking up an AR-15 and pulling the trigger while the rifle was pointed at the back of his wife's head, with the evidence of abuse, his failure to call 911, and his attempt to hide the evidence. Prosecutors charged Schuyler with first-degree murder of Danielle Nemitz. Schuyler was held in the Pierce County Jail under a $1 million bond. Upon hearing the news, his mother, Danette, had sold her house, her car, and her jewelry to pay for his bond before hiring a top-notch defense attorney. While on house arrest in the lead-up to the trial, Schuyler spoke to 48 Hours.
She doesn't have a car anymore, and that's all because of me. And yet, at the same time, she wants to do this. I mean, I did have to explain to my mom that what I did was, the state of Washington classified as negligence.
And then, a year and a half after shooting his wife, Schuyler Nemitz went on trial. The prosecution presented the jury text messages between the couple that revealed their constant arguments. Schuyler, they said, was someone with an in-depth knowledge of firearms. He had fired his first gun at the age of 4, his first AR-15 at 11, and by the time he was a teenager, he was building and assembling his own. Schuyler could not possibly have made such a basic error as pointing a weapon at someone and pulling the trigger. A forensic scientist from the Washington State Patrol examined the weapon that had killed Danielle. He tested the functioning of the rifle and the cartridge and performed a trigger pull analysis. The results came back as typical for a firearm of that type. He stated that pulling the trigger with one finger would be comparable to lifting a 3/4 gallon of milk with one finger. Numerous witnesses testified for the prosecution against Schuyler, claiming to have personally witnessed the evidence that he had abused Danielle. Finally, it was Schuyler's turn to defend himself. Schuyler's testimony closely echoed the story he had told police during his interrogation. This time, though, he added that he had screamed Danielle's name after shooting her, and that if it hadn't been for his neighbors pounding on his apartment door, he would have taken his own life out of distress. When asked why he hadn't rendered any form of aid, he claimed that he already knew she was dead. The prosecutor probed Schuyler about the alcohol use and why, instead of holding his dying wife, he had chosen instead to get rid of the evidence by flushing the alcohol down a toilet. To this, Schuyler got emotional, telling the jury that he wished he had done things differently.
For some stupid apparent reason, I thought alcohol needed to be poured out, which is, it was completely stupid. I don't know why.
If I could have done what I wanted, if I could go back and do what was right, I would have sat there and held her. And I would have prayed.
Skylar's fingers had allegedly been injured during the process of pulling the trigger. Prosecutors argued that the blood residues he had left around the apartment showed he had been in no hurry to get help or to answer the door to his neighbors.
He left a considerable amount of blood at various locations within this apartment after he were injured, correct?
I saw the pictures.
Correct?
Correct.
Okay. That's when it happened, correct?
As far as I know, I did not see the injury until I was in my interrogation. And I know that because in my interrogation I see myself looking at it.
You just testified that you injured your finger in the firing of that weapon.
Yes, I did.
Okay. So we know that only after you fired the weapon would you have left a blood trail in that apartment, correct?
Yes.
All right. And among the areas that you left blood was what's called a spatter, I guess, technical term. There was a significant amount of blood around the door frame of your bedroom. Correct?
I believe so.
Okay. And we also know that you left a smear on the top of the refrigerator in the kitchen, correct?
Yes, I've seen that picture.
Okay. You also left a smear by the slider, correct?
Yes, I've also seen that picture.
And that would positively indicate areas that you went before you ever entered the door, correct?
Yes, possibly.
Possibly. Did you go to the slider after entering the door?
I do not remember.
You don't remember?
Yes.
Okay. You remember pulling the trigger?
No, I do not.
Don't remember that either.
In a closing argument to the jury, Skylar's defense attorney, Michael Stewart, reiterated Skylar's claim that the shooting of Danielle Nemitz had been unintentional. Skylar may be guilty of manslaughter, but not premeditated first-degree murder. The jury returned with a verdict on March 3, 2016, after 7 days of deliberation. Skylar was found guilty of manslaughter, but cleared of first-degree murder. The jury had not believed the state's case that Skylar had intended to kill his wife. Skylar Nemitz was sentenced to 13.5 years in prison for the taking of the life of his wife, Danielle Nemitz. He will be free by 2029. This case is dreadfully tragic. A man brutally murdered his wife by hitting her repeatedly with a baseball bat. Then, 2 weeks later, he suffocated his 2 young stepsons. But his murdering streak did not end until 4 weeks later, when he drowned his 2 little girls in a bathtub. Why did he do it? And why did he keep the bodies in the back of his van for weeks after he killed them? Before we start, we would like to send our sincere condolences to the loved ones of Casey Jones and her 4 children who fell victim to the abominable acts described in this case. Welcome to Summerfield, a small unincorporated community located in Marion County in Central Florida. Meet 32-year-old Casey Jones and her 4 children, 10-year-old Cameron Bowers, 5-year-old Preston Bowers, 2-year-old Mercalli Jones, and 1-year-old Ayana Jones. She was a very caring and thoughtful woman, the type of person who would give a complete stranger the shirt off her back. She loved caring for animals, especially dogs, as a veterinary technician and groomer up until back problems forced her to become a stay-at-home mom. But most of all, Casey was a devoted mother and wife who always put her family first. Especially her children. Her social media pages were filled with images and videos that portrayed a big, happy family. No one could have predicted what would come to pass during the fateful summer of 2019. During that summer, the children spent time with extended family, The little girls with Casey's mother, Nikki Jones, and the boys with their biological father, Richard Bowers, Casey's ex-husband. It was on August 1st when Nikki received an unexpected message from Casey asking if she could watch the girls, Markali and Ayana, for a few days. Nikki thought it was odd when Michael showed up to drop the girls off instead of Casey, but didn't think too much of it at the time. A few days later, Nikki received another message from Casey stating that she was sick and asked if Nikki could hold on to the girls for a little longer. She had the two girls for 2 weeks before Michael showed up to take the girls home. During the time that she had Markali and Ayana, Nikki received no messages from Casey other than asking her to watch the kids for a bit longer. This was unlike Casey, who would normally check up with the children quite frequently whenever they were in someone else's care. Still, nothing about the girls or Michael's behavior gave off any indication that something was wrong. More time went by, and the boys' birthdays passed without Nikki or her other two daughters, Sarah or Brandy Gilbert, receiving a single phone call or message from Casey, which was not like her at all. She usually made a big deal over the children's birthdays and always included her extended family in the celebrations. On September 14th, 2019, Nikki, Sarah, and Brandy realized that weeks had passed since anyone had actually heard from or seen Casey. In addition, Casey had not been active on her social media. Panicking, Nikki first thought that it was Michael that must have killed Casey, but Brandy and Sarah thought their mother was overreacting. They believed a more reasonable explanation that Michael was probably running from the law again, so Casey's family could be in hiding. Michael had been arrested multiple times in the past for burglary and grand theft. Back in 2015, Michael had gone into hiding after stealing money, a gun, and computer equipment from the Mount Dora Animal Hospital, where he and Casey worked as veterinary technicians. During that incident, Casey supported Michael financially when he fled to New Mexico to avoid being arrested, so no one in the family would have been surprised to hear that Michael was running from the law again. Still, Nikki was not convinced. Fearing for the safety of her daughter and grandchildren, she called the Marion County Sheriff's Office and asked for a well-being check on Casey. Deputy Chase King went by the Jones residence to check on the family, but the home was vacant and had recently been cleaned out by the landowner. King spoke with one of the Jones neighbors who said that he was asked by the property manager to accompany one of the maintenance employees over to the Jones house to investigate a strong and foul odor coming from the mobile home. The neighbors said that it smelled as if something had died in that house.
Was there anything else out of the ordinary that you noticed?
Some plastic.
What plastic? Windshield was replaced with plastic, or there was just plastic over it?
It looked like it had plastic right there.
Are you talking about like see-through plastic?
Yeah,
like
but it wasn't see-through.
Kind of like an opaque saran wrap?
It was a plastic, but not see-through.
My lieutenant's on his way. I don't know if he may want to talk to you. He may just talk to me and see what information I've got from you. Is there any other information you might be able to give me? I do. Toward Sharps Ferry, and then you went toward Baseline, right? You're positive you turned left on Sharps Ferry. Like I said, I do appreciate your time. If you wouldn't mind just hanging up a minute, my lieutenant's on his way here. He's somewhere on this road. He's just got to find a spot here, so.
On top of the bad smell emitting from the home, King noticed a small red stain on one of the bedroom floors as he peeked through the windows. After discovering the red stain, King called Sergeant Micah Moore to come and help him investigate the house further. With the property manager's permission, King and Moore entered the home. The smell permeated throughout the home, and they recognized it as the smell of human or animal decomposition. King and Moore noticed one of the bedrooms had a new parquet floor and baseboards installed. When they questioned the property owner about the repairs, they were immediately told to leave. Without a search warrant, there wasn't anything more they could do. So King and Moore contacted 2 more investigators. They briefed them on the situation, and they promptly began searching for and contacting family members of both Casey and Michael. With no clues to trace Casey or Michael's whereabouts, the sheriff's office posted a missing and endangered advisory on the morning of September the 15th for Casey and the children, and began working on getting a search warrant for their Summerfield home. During that time, the sheriff's office received a phone call from Casey's ex-husband, Richard Bowers, who had just discovered that the boys and Casey were missing. Bowers had picked up the boys from Michael on July 27th. It was always Casey who met up with him to drop off the boys, so Bowers was surprised to see Michael instead. Since he had recently fought with Casey over getting the boys for the summer, he chalked it up to Casey not wanting to see him and thought no more about it. Bowers kept the boys until August the 10th. Upon returning the children to Casey again, it was Michael who showed up. As Bowers was dropping off the boys, Michael took him by surprise by apologizing to him. Apparently, Casey had been telling Michael that Bowers was abusive towards her and the children when they were together. Michael had since realized that Casey was lying and felt a need to apologize for believing all of the things that she had told him.
And I told him, and he remembered this saying, a few years afterwards, because he even quoted it to me, and this was as, I was bringing them to Georgia, but before we left the mall parking lot when I had picked them up for the first time, he had said, Richard, I just want to tell you, you told me something a few years ago that rings in my ears, and I had told him, I said, when we were in our altercation, I said, brother, I said, you freed me from 13 years of hell. Yeah. And I said, thank you. And he reiterated that to me. He reminded me of that. He said, I want to tell you that I never forgot those words that you told me, because I know now what you meant to this very day. And, he just kind of gave me a brief history of, everything that he's put her through, about how if there's an 80-year-old woman walking down the street, he's got to hold his head down because she would accuse him of, trying to have sex with her, or pretty much any female, because that's what it was with me. But the part that was weird, sir, is he was really cool with me, like he was my homeboy or something, like we were best friends. And that's, I guess, it never dawned on me, of course now it does, but it never dawned on me at that moment that, it's almost like that was his apology for everything that he had done. And here I was, I took it hook, line, and sinker, because I'm a forgiving guy, I want to try to see the best in people. And I ate it up, and we even hugged, he shook my hand.
Though this apology, along with Michael's sudden friendly behavior towards him, was shocking, like Casey's family, Bowers didn't pick up on any clues that Michael was giving him that might lead him to believe that something was wrong. Bowers didn't realize anything was amiss until he saw the missing and endangered advisory for Casey and the 4 children on Facebook. That was when he called the Marion County Sheriff's Office. Hours later, Detective Bartlett discovered Michael Jones was involved in a single vehicle crash in Georgia that same day. When police arrived on the scene, Michael immediately confessed to killing both Casey and the children.
41-year-old Michael Wayne Jones was arrested in Georgia in September of 2019 after a single-car crash. According to arrest documents, a deputy noticed a bad odor coming from the car, and when he asked Jones about it, Jones said his wife Casey's body was inside the vehicle. Jones then took investigators to a wooded area where he had disposed of the children's bodies in totes and suitcases. Detectives say Jones told them he first killed his wife with a metal baseball bat. He then killed each child on different days and times by strangling or drowning them.
Who is Michael Wayne Jones? We don't know all of the details of Michael's past. He was born in 1980 and grew up in Vermont. He lived with his mother and father until his father was sent to prison for reasons that were not disclosed. Eventually, his mother remarried, and Michael's stepfather turned out to be abusive. At some point during his childhood, Michael was the victim of sexual abuse, but we don't know by whom. Michael grew up struggling with depression. He was prescribed the antidepressant Wellbutrin, which is used to treat major depressive disorders. We don't know when he started taking the medication, but he was definitely taking it in the year he murdered his family. Though Michael had stayed in touch with his mother throughout his life, they were never able to establish a healthy relationship. For 5 years, Michael was in the United States Navy and also served with the Marines in the medical field. Not long after getting out of the military, Michael married his first wife, Sarah. The couple had 3 children together. For work reasons, the family decided to move to Central Florida around 2011. Sarah got a job working at the Mount Dora Animal Hospital in Orange County. Eventually, Sarah talked the owners into giving Michael a job at the clinic as well. Michael had a positive reputation at the vet clinic and was well liked by the owners and staff. In 2014, Casey Jones, then having the last name Bowers, was hired to work as a veterinary technician. It wasn't long before Michael and Casey had an affair, and both ended up getting divorced from their first spouses as a result. In 2015, Michael's true colors began to show. The owners of the vet clinic realized Michael was manipulative, deceptive, and had been making sexual advances towards female staff. After learning of all of this, the owners fired him. In retaliation, Michael snuck into the clinic and stole the items that we mentioned previously. Though Casey witnessed Michael's manipulative and deceptive personality, she stayed with him, and they were married on Halloween in 2017. Mercalli Jones was born the same year Michael and Casey married. Ayanna was born the following year. Less than a year after Ayanna was born, Michael would murder his wife and all 4 children. On July 10th, Michael and Casey got into a heated argument. According to Michael, Casey accused him of cheating and came at him with a baseball bat. She pushed him with the bat, and then Michael pulled it from her hands and began to strike her repeatedly until she died. Michael took her body and hid it in his bedroom. At some point, Michael made the decision to kill the boys, Cameron and Preston, after he got them back from their father. They returned home from their father's house on August the 10th. Between that day and August 22nd is when Michael murdered them. He targeted Cameron first, strangling him with his bare hands while holding him down with his knee against the boy's back. The following night, he went after Preston. Taking a zip tie, Michael tightened it around the young man's throat and waited for him to die. Michael would tell investigators that he chose to use a zip tie on Preston because his hands were sore from strangling Cameron the night before. On August the 28th, Michael decided to kill the 2 girls, his own children, as well. Filling up the bathtub, he took the girls one by one and held them under the water until they drowned. Michael placed all of the bodies in bags and totes and used cat litter to clean up. At this time, Michael was facing eviction and was going to be forced to move out at the end of August. He had to find a place to go quickly. During Labor Day weekend, Michael phoned his ex-wife, Sarah. He said that he and Casey had split up, and Casey took the children and went to her mother's house. To Michael's convenience, Sarah asked him to stay at her house in Jacksonville so that she didn't have to be alone during the upcoming Hurricane Dorian. Before heading to Jacksonville, Michael placed all of the bodies in the back of the van and then drove to Sarah's house. Michael stayed with Sarah until she received a phone call from the Marion County Sheriff's Office asking if she had seen Casey or Michael. Michael told her to tell the police that she had seen Casey and the children, and she obeyed. At that point, Michael realized it was time for him to leave and took off that afternoon and headed towards Georgia.
Yeah, up in Jacksonville. She stayed in the apartment? Yes. Did you guys hear that phone call that last last night? What was the deal with all that? She woke me up early morning and asked me what was I just tried to spin stuff. And I said, let me just get on the road. Did you tell her what was going on? She told us that when she talked to me this morning, you were still there. Is that true? When she spoke to him, yeah, I was there. What was going on? Just trying to figure it out. You were trying to figure out what I had going on. Did she talk to you? Did you tell her what to say to me? Or? No, I she thought it was looking for just me, so I said, you see me or whatever, you see Kate, you see everybody, So yeah, I guess I didn't tell him. So basically, what was the deal with McDonald's? She mentioned something about being at McDonald's. She mentioned you at McDonald's on Friday or something, big when she was a kid. Oh. That's usually what it takes. That should be a check up. They're going halfway. So, after that phone call, how long after that phone call do you leave? So you were there for a while. After I called in the first one for me, did you tell her exactly what was going on? Just meant, I gotta get out of here. Yeah. Did you get out of there after I called the second time? Around that time, she wasn't coming back. Talked about, why did you have to tell the most? Coming back. You called me, right? They called you.
Between September 1st and September 14th, Michael had all 5 bodies stashed in the back of his van while staying with Sarah, who was completely unaware. Once he entered the state of Georgia, Michael took the children's bodies and hid them in a wooded area near the highway. But for some reason, he left Casey's body in the back of the van. Not long after getting back on the road, Michael ended up swerving off the road and crashed his van while checking his GPS. Michael received minor injuries from the crash and made the choice to call 911. When police arrived, he made no attempt to hide Casey's body. He immediately told police that he had murdered his wife and that he had her body in the back of the van. Michael also told police about the 4 children, what he had done, and where he hid the bodies. Michael was arrested and taken in for questioning. During the interrogation, police were surprised to find Michael calm, collected, and cooperative. Michael was first interrogated at a Georgia police station. During that interview, Michael stated that he had murdered Casey. He had pretended to be her by using her phone to send messages to family members.
I had her phone for a while, and I would text and send her Casey. What's Casey's phone number? So then you're answering text messages back and forth, and
He also created posts on Casey's social media accounts to give the impression that she was still alive.
You were pretending this whole time to be Casey, obviously on Facebook too, because you got some collages that you made or something on Facebook that posted down.
Michael told investigators he considered turning himself in before he had murdered his daughters. He sat parked in front of the City Hall in Marion County, Florida for quite some time. But in the end, he chose to take the girls' lives and tried to run. Once the police in Georgia were done with Michael, he was returned to Marion County, where he went through another interrogation. During this interrogation, investigators asked Michael if he had ever physically abused the children, which he denied. However, he mentioned that Cameron and Preston's biological father had.
During our investigation, somebody mentioned some incidents that happened with the boys previously. Have there been any, like, issues where you discipline the children or anything like that and it got out of hand? How would you discipline boys?
Most of the time I would separate and go to the room, but sometimes I would spank them in the butt. Other than that was it.
Did you ever spank them with anything besides your hand?
No.
There was mention that the boys were disciplined. I don't know if it was spanking or something. I know that when I was a kid, I'd get spanked with a belt.
Yeah.
Did you ever spank the kid with a belt?
No.
Or
I've had that happen.
no switch from the tree, nothing like that?
No.
Somebody mentioned that maybe a clothes hanger?
No. But that would have been something that happened with their father.
Tell me about that.
A couple of years ago, he was investigating. He had the kids for a weekend. It was Halloween, around Halloween. And, the boys came back in their costumes, and the oldest kid had a Batman costume on one page. He's autistic and he has trouble with it. But it was, so he said, hey, take this off. So I undid it, and as soon as I did, he was going pee, you need to go pee. So I hollered at his mother, and he had bruises all over his little back.
Really?
Yeah, real bad. And it was investigated in Lake County. Bacon Eustis at the time. And we did investigations, and I told her she was going to, there was going to be an arrest made. It never happened. It kind of fell through the cracks. I'm not really sure exactly how, what went on with it, other than that I guess he had an attorney, and he said it might have happened on a bounce house or something like that. But
okay, so that was all kind of pushed to the side and went away.
Yeah.
Throughout the interrogation process, Michael was asked why he murdered his wife and the children, especially his own little girls, Mercalli and Ayana. He said his relationship with Casey gradually became more and more hostile.
What's you guys' relationship like? I mean, is this an ongoing thing where you guys are at each other like this, like fighting?
It just got worse. Like, little things all the time with her. She would come at me, and we'd argue. Never really got physical.
When Casey came at him with the bat and accused him of cheating, he just lost it. After murdering Casey, why did he decide to go after the children? Why didn't he just leave them with family members? Empty prescription bottles and alcohol containers in the home show that Michael could have been under the influence of drugs, alcohol, or both when he murdered any one or all of his victims. But he never claimed to be under the influence of either during his interrogations. The trial began on December 8th, 2022 at the Marion County Judicial Center. Michael was tried for second-degree murder in the death of Casey and first-degree premeditated homicide for the death of the 4 children. Since he had admitted to murdering his family, his trial went directly to the penalty phase. Michael may spend the rest of his life in prison or may face the death penalty.
True evil poked its head up here in Marion County. That's about the only best way to describe it. As a father, as a parent, it breaks my heart. As a sheriff, it angers me to no end. Now, as far as I'm concerned, as the sheriff of this county, underneath the jail ain't good enough. He has no right to walk the face of this earth. I hate to be him when he stands before the Lord.
I have never been a fan of the death penalty, but to be very honest with you, these are those cases where I would much rather that happens than that he sits somewhere
On December 12th, the state attorney rested their case, stating that he wants Michael to receive the death penalty, and so do a few others. The state attorney explained to the jury how, in detail, Michael had brutally killed each and every member of his family without remorse. While the state attorney works hard to get Michael the death penalty, the defense attorney is fighting to keep Michael alive and have him spend the rest of his life in prison instead. The defense is scheduled to make their case in January of next year. He plans on calling 18 witnesses to the stand to prove that Michael deserves life and that his actions were the result of years of trauma he had suffered as a child and later the multiple relationships that he had as an adult with dominating and abusing women. The defense is referring to Michael's actions as a freefall of psychotic chaos brought on by a lifetime of abuse. The defense also believes the jury should take into consideration the fact that Michael willingly confessed to the murders of Casey and the children and even provided the location of the bodies instead of trying to cover it up on the day that he was involved in that accident. After all, it was Michael who had called 911 after the car accident, knowing he still had his wife's body in the back of his van with the strong smell of decay emanating from it. In Florida, the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence says 37.9% of women and 29.3% of men experience domestic violence. According to the Florida Department of Children and Families, domestic violence cases were on the decline in 2018. However, the numbers began to rise again in 2019, the year Casey and her children were murdered. The lockdown during the COVID-19 pandemic caused the amount of domestic violence cases to rise even more during the following year. In 2019, the department had 105,298 documented cases of domestic violence, ranging from what would be considered simple stalking to criminal homicide. In 2020, the numbers went up to 106,615, which was the highest number of cases since 2017. The NCADV says 1 in 4 women and 1 in 9 men experience severe intimate partner physical violence. During his interrogation, Michael admitted that he murdered Casey after putting up with years of abuse from her. He couldn't take it anymore and lost it. But it's hard to know for sure if this is true, since he has a history of being deceptive and manipulative. Is he just trying to gain some sympathy? According to Casey's sister, Sarah, Casey and her siblings grew up in a violent and unstable household. All 3 girls were physically abused by their mother. Sarah says that their traumatic childhood led all 3 girls to grow up with the ability to become vindictive and aggressive, and she wouldn't be surprised if Casey was abusive towards Michael if provoked. During Michael's interrogation in Georgia, a detective mentioned that one of Michael's employees had complained about the numerous calls and messages Michael constantly received at work from Casey.
He said that you were getting phone calls all day long and text messages all day long from Casey and... Oh, that would be so bad. Yeah. I worked for him for a couple years. No, Eric. Okay, so that was Eric, the new boss over there.
Casey's ex-husband, Richard Bowers, also said to Marion County investigators that she was physically and verbally abusive towards him during their 10-year marriage.
I remember a time when we were back in Indiana, it was only Cameron at the time, who was my oldest. He was on the couch, and I was on the phone with my mom, just talking to her, and, she comes up behind me, rips out the phone cord, grabs a knife, chases me around the whole townhouse. I run upstairs. Keeping granted, this is in the winter time, up in northern Indiana, so it's cold. I had to open up a window, please. I was screaming, for my life. And, the cops came. I remember one of the officers said, "Are you sure she's all right?" I said, "No, she's got, some issues." But, how much do you want to know? I could tell you everything,
Though Casey was abusive towards him, the couple did not divorce until after the affair between Casey and Michael. Richard Bowers never claimed that Casey was abusive towards the children, and he did not try to take sole custody of them, but opted for joint custody instead. Bowers told investigators he did not like nor trust Michael, and that his eldest son Cameron had once told him that Michael abused both the children and Casey. Bowers goes on to say that he was well aware that Casey and Michael had a history of long and violent arguments, yet none of this information seemed to discourage him from leaving his children in Michael's care. With all of this supposed knowledge of the abuse in the Jones household, why didn't Richard Bowers do something to ensure the safety of his own children? Perhaps because he wasn't putting much effort into being in their lives in general. Casey had the children most of the time, and Bowers did not consistently make time for the boys. A text-message argument between Bowers and Casey accuses Bowers of going an entire year without seeing his children.
So I reached out to her originally June 5th at 5:50 p.m.
What does that conversation entail?
I told her, this is Richard. I'm reaching out to you regarding the boys. I'd like to know when they are off from school, and when do they resume back again, and what a good time would be to plan for picking them up for the summer. Thanks. And she goes, they have been out and will be back in August, and we will be out of town most of July. And she says they have been out and will be back in August for twice the same thing. And so then I answered, good. Well, I'll need them for about 2 weeks, so please be sure to accommodate your scheduling so we can set a proper time for a pickup. She says that's good. After a year, you finally want to see them. You can get them anytime you want, before or after July. I have had plans that are paid for already that I can't choose. And she says it's about July 3rd to the 23rd, and that was all on June 5th. And so then I responded back, This isn't any new information. You knew this time was coming, which is why you and I sought an attorney. Anyway, next time be mindful of the scheduling so you can plan accordingly. And she goes, I will not work around when it's finally convenient for you to have something to do with the boys. You have not contacted them in over a year, so I've already made plans for the summer. So as far as this time was coming, no, I had no idea, because you haven't even called them for their birthday or Christmas. So the lawyer was your idea. I have never kept them from you, and the lawyer also said that you give me a 30-day notice, and if I don't have plans, then you get them. You should have had plans months ago, as I did, so I plan around my work and around my college times off, which is in July. I won't be changing stuff. It's already paid off, which my lawyer already knows about. For someone that walked out without even telling the boys anything, you really tell me to be mindful. That's not fair. I'm sorry. The boys are important to you, but they are my life. Everything I do is for them. It has been your loss on what you have missed out on this past year, but I will not change anything in our life to fit your schedule. You are the one that abandoned them. You can have them anytime it's convenient for you, as long as I don't have plans with them. I can't stop their life because you want to come in and out whenever it fits you.
No one ever noticed any aggressive or abusive behavior from Michael. Michael's ex-wife, Sarah, never claimed Michael to be abusive towards her or their children. The only person to claim that Michael was abusive was Casey's ex-husband. Casey's family believed they were a happily married couple. Even though they did not particularly like Michael, he appeared to be a doting father and husband. And Casey's social media pages were always filled with happy family photos and videos. No one thought to look for signs of trouble. None were found until it was too late. No doubt, unaddressed domestic violence played a significant role in the tragic events that occurred in this case. Casey's family continued to struggle with the loss of their loved ones. It has been more than 2 years since they lost Casey and her 4 children, and they continue to wait and see how this horrific tragedy will transpire. In court, Casey's sisters, Sarah and Brandy, talked about how close Casey was with her family and how badly losing her and the children has affected them all. Both of Casey's parents died without seeing their daughter's murderer brought to justice. Sarah said their mother wanted to see Michael get the death penalty. Sarah, however, disagrees with the death penalty. She sees death as an easy out for Michael and wishes him to spend the rest of his life in a cell with nothing but time to think about what he had done. What will the jury decide? Will Michael have to pay for his crimes with his life, or will they choose to have him spend the rest of his life behind bars? If you or someone you know is a victim of domestic violence, no matter the severity, contact the National Domestic Violence Hotline. They are available 24/7 by phone or chat to discuss domestic violence situations and help create a personalized safety plan. Call 1-800-799-SAFE 7233 or visit thehotline.org or a similar organization in your country. Help is waiting.
Say hi to the camera. Say hi. Hi, baby.
He likes the sound of the